The Valley Factory site is located in the Alyn Valley, north of the town of Mold in Flintshire, North Wales. It's adjacent to the village of Rhydymwyn. Prior to acquisition by the government in 1939, the site's principal previous use has been as a lead mine. During the early stages of World War II, it was developed as the UK's principal mustard gas storage facility, and also had major mustard production, munitions filling and munitions assembly capabilities. Other products from the site during the war were smoke generators and pyrotechnics. It was also involved in a minor way in some of the early experiments for the UK's atomic weapon programme. The Ministry of Public Buildings and Works, later to become the Property Services Agency, assumed responsibility for maintaining the site, and from this time it was used as a buffer depot for the storage of a variety of non-perishable foodstuffs. Transfer of responsibility to MAF occurred in 1992, and use of the site as a buffer depot ceased in 1994. Since this time, the buildings have been empty and redundant. The site is a mile long and still contains over 80 standing buildings. An investigation of the site was carried out in the 1980s in order to establish the levels of contamination. Active mustard agents were identified in 6 locations within known toxic burial pits. Chemical weapon degradation products were identified in a further 36 locations, and in addition a large number of samples contained elevated heavy metal concentrations. No significant radiation above background levels was detected. Adjacent to the eastern perimeter of the site is Antelope Field. It was decommissioned and sold after the war and has since been redeveloped as an industrial estate. Plans have been considered in the past for the creation of an access point onto the Valley Factory from this site. The land between Antelope Field and the Valley Factory was the former site of the Denbigh to Mold branch line, and the site had an extensive internal rail network. Between 1946 to 1948, the production plant and associated facilities were decommissioned. Buildings known to have handled chemical warfare agent were tested. No hazardous chemical concentrations were identified, though in some buildings traces of mustard degradation product were present in the fabric of the building. Remote sensing for buried munitions was carried out across the entire site surface. Many metallic objects were identified and their locations, depths and similarity to known munition types recorded. And in one backfilled sump, intact aircraft bombs were unearthed charged with live mustard chemical agent. During the war, in total almost 5 million chemical munitions were produced at Valley Factory and almost 2 million smoke generators. The potential for contaminated land is not restricted to toxic burial pits. The greatest issue in this respect is the area of tipping present in the southernmost end of the site. Obvious contaminated features exposed at surface include barrels of bleach, ammunition trays, process pipework, and even the isolated find of munitions themselves. All of the chemical production processes were carried out in the northern portion of the site. The southern portion of the site was used for the assembly of the munitions, which included the fitting of explosive burster charges and fuses. These operations were conducted in a large number of small buildings used for the distribution, handling and storage of explosives. The principal reason for the selection of the valley site over other possible locations for the factory was the steep wall of the valley on the western side. This limestone hillside was recognised as being suitable for the excavation of a storage complex sufficiently far underground that it would have been safe from enemy bombing. The underground storage chambers were supplied with their own drainage network, power supply and ventilation systems. Today they lie completely empty and receiving inputs of water from the limestone strata. The complex consists of 3 parallel entrance tunnels approximately 250 metres long, connecting 4 transverse chambers 170 metres by 9 metres wide. The underground storage chambers were used to handle the bulk mustard in lead-lined tanks and the weaponised mustard in the various munition types. In the 1990s, a significant archive of documentary records for the site became available for the first time. This revealed much useful information on the operation of the site and the materials used. Organic solvents were used in a variety of the processes, and a number of leaks in the pipework and drains were noted. Also, for the first time, information became available on the use of the site after the war for the storage of captured German nerve agent. Fortunately, this storage would appear to have only taken place for a short period and no problems were recorded. Although minor rockfalls do take place from time to time, the tunnels remain in reasonable structural condition. Monitoring is ongoing of slight movement in sidewalls. These caverns are subject to inspection by the Chemical Warfare Convention inspection teams, and their future will have to be determined with respect to the recommendations of this body. Near the entrance to the tunnels is the only properly marked toxic burial pit on the site. This dates from the clear out of the tunnels in the 1960s and was exhumed as part of the recent investigations on the site. It was found to contain concentrations of mustard gas breakdown product, dioxins, organic solvents, heavy metals, and asbestos. Also found were 4 empty munition cases. The River Allen used to serve a number of mill buildings in the village and on the site itself. Previously, flooding of the village has occurred, where trees and debris carried down by floodwater has been trapped against the protective gates at the entrance to the site. These gates are now automatically controlled to lift in times of high water. With the construction of the site in 1939, the river was culverted into a concrete channel down one side of the valley floor in order to make room for the production buildings. This concrete channel is dry for much of the year due to the limestone strata and underlying lead workings. However, after periods of heavy rainfall, it can become a raging torrent. The site perimeter and river culvert are surrounded by security fencing, with warning notices and a patrol force to deter intruders. Partway through the site, the river culvert divides into 2 and goes underground. One underground section picks up drainage coming from the underground storage channels, whilst the other branch picks up an underground culvert from a side stream. Both underground sections recombine in the southern portion of the site, and at the foot of the site, the river follows its original course. In order to address concerns regarding the quality of water on the site, various samples were taken from boreholes, underground lead workings, and the River Allen. Only carbon tetrachloride in a few of the groundwater samples was detected at levels marginally above the drinking water standards. Groundwater modelling indicates that these groundwater concentrations would be diluted to well below the drinking water standard on entering the River Allen. Just beyond the southern perimeter fence of the site lies a fish pond in an old river meander. This would be the most sensitive receptor of any contaminated groundwater moving off the site, and this is being regularly monitored to demonstrate the absence of pollution. The detailed monitoring carried out to date indicates that the risk to water resources from groundwater beneath the Valley Factory site is not significant. Two laboratory buildings were situated in the northeastern portion of the site. Their function was to carry out quality assurance and quality control testing of the mustard produced at the factory. They were decommissioned in the 1960s and toxic drains concreted over. Since its closure, the site has been attractive to a number of trespasser groups, including children and scrap metal scavengers. Potentially hazardous features have been covered with soil, and ladders on buildings have been removed. Spillages and toxic accidents are known to have occurred, some of a serious nature. It was not possible to entirely decontaminate the filling cubicles, so their floors and connecting underground trenches were concreted over. The buildings themselves are not in imminent danger of collapse, but are deteriorating over time and are a visual reminder of the wartime legacy represented by the site.